Don Rickles didn't come from fame or fortune. He was born in 1926 in Queens, New York, to Jewish immigrant parents. His father, Max, worked in insurance. His mother, Ada, ran the household and held the family together. They spoke Yiddish at the dinner table, followed strict traditions, and carried deep memories of persecution and escape from Europe. Life in the Rickles home wasn't easy, but it was full of stories, survival, and strength. From a young age, Don felt different. He wasn't the best student. He didn't follow the rules, but he had one gift that set him apart: his mouth. He could make people laugh without trying. He had a way of cutting through tension with a joke. It wasn't just funny. It was fast, fearless, and biting. His humor came from a place of defense. At home, there was pressure. Outside, there was struggle. Making jokes became his way of staying in control. At Newtown High School, he barely passed classes, but teachers and students all knew who he was. He stood out in the drama club, not for acting talent, but for his ability to roast people in the audience, including the staff. He wasn't mean, just sharp. He made people laugh at things they weren't supposed to laugh at, and they loved him for it. But Don's world changed fast. When he turned 18, the country was deep into World War II. Like many young men, he was given an early graduation and sent off to serve in the military. He joined the U.S. Navy in 1943 and was stationed in the Pacific, far from the comedy clubs and city lights. Life aboard the USS Cyrene was tough. The heat was brutal. The fear of enemy attacks never went away. Food was bad. Days were long. But Rickles didn't stay quiet. He joked about everything: the meals, the officers, even the danger around them. And his fellow sailors loved it. Laughter made the stress easier to bear. It helped them forget how close they were to death. This experience taught Don something important. If you could make people laugh in the middle of a war, you could survive anything. Humor wasn't just fun. It was armor. It was power. When he came home from the Navy, Don tried to live a normal life. His father wanted him to sell insurance. He gave it a shot, going door to door in a suit, trying to make sales. But he hated every second. It wasn't him. He couldn't sell policies. He could barely get people to listen. The job didn't fit. He needed an audience, not a front porch. Don was lost. That's when his mother, Ada, stepped in again. She didn't want money. She wanted her son to be happy. She encouraged him to follow his passion. So, in 1948, Don enrolled in the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. He wanted to be a serious actor. But every time he delivered a dramatic line, people laughed. Eventually, he stopped fighting it. And that's when everything started to fall into place. By the early 1950s, Don Rickles had finished drama school, but he still wasn't famous. Acting hadn't worked the way he hoped. Casting directors didn't know what to do with him. He was too loud for leading roles, too sharp for background parts, and too funny to be serious. So he turned to the only place that would take him: small nightclubs in the Catskills. These weren't glamorous gigs. They were noisy resorts filled with tourists who liked to drink and heckle. For most comedians, it was a nightmare. But for Rickles, it was the training ground that would shape his future. One night, while performing his regular act, a few drunk guests started yelling at him. It could have ruined the show. Instead, Rickles snapped back. He didn't just answer their shouts, he destroyed them. Quick jabs, brutal lines, roasts on the fly. The crowd went from rude to roaring. They'd never seen anything like it. That night, Don discovered what made him different. He wasn't a traditional comedian. He didn't tell neat little jokes. He attacked. He roasted. He turned the audience into part of the act. And it worked. That was also the night he called someone a hockey puck. Nobody knew what it meant, not even Don. But it sounded funny, and it stuck. It became his signature insult, one he would use for the rest of his career. In the mid-1950s, Rickles started getting booked in rougher places. Small clubs in New Jersey, New York, and Chicago, often connected to the mob. These weren't friendly rooms. The crowds were wild, the owners were tougher, and the wrong joke could get you in trouble. But Rickles thrived in that chaos. He worked 3 shows a night. He got sharper, meaner, faster. He could turn any interruption into a laugh. He developed a rhythm that felt dangerous, but never hateful. He made fun of people right to their faces, and they came back for more. Still, the danger was real. One night in a New Jersey club, he made a joke about a woman's weight, laughed, called her a moose. The room went silent. He didn't know it, but the man next to her was mob-connected. After the show, Rickles was asked to go backstage. Everyone expected a beating. Instead, the man handed him a drink and said, "You got guts." Rickles walked away unharmed, but he never forgot how close he came to serious trouble. And it wouldn't be the last time. In 1972, the risk got even closer. He was performing at the Copacabana in New York City. Sitting in the audience that night was Joey Gallo, a dangerous, well-known mob boss who had just been released from prison. Everyone knew who he was. Everyone was nervous, except Don. From the stage, Rickles ripped into Gallo just like any other guest. He made jokes about his prison time, his suit, his business. People backstage were terrified. Gallo didn't react until later. He invited Rickles to his birthday dinner at Umberto's Clam House. Rickles declined. A few hours later, gunmen stormed the restaurant. Gallo was shot and killed at the table. If Don had said yes, he likely would have been sitting right there. And everything would have ended that night. After years of hustling in nightclubs, Don Rickles finally landed his first movie role in 1958. It wasn't a comedy. It wasn't even close. Run Silent, Run Deep was a serious World War II drama, and Rickles played a Navy man, something he actually had experience with. Sharing scenes with legends like Clark Gable and Burt Lancaster, he proved he could act straight when needed. Audiences were surprised. Rickles, the loudmouth comic, gave a solid performance. No jokes, no roasting, just quiet strength and focus. For a moment, it looked like a new door had opened. Maybe Hollywood was ready to take him seriously. But Hollywood had other plans. In the 1960s, a new trend took over: beach party movies. Silly plots, young dancers, and endless scenes of surfing and singing. Producers were looking for comic relief characters, and Rickles fit the bill. Before long, he was starring in titles like Muscle Beach Party, Bikini Beach, and Beach Blanket Bingo. These movies were fun, light, colorful, and forgettable. Rickles played the goofy adult among a cast of teenagers. He did what he could with weak scripts, adding his usual edge and timing. But critics didn't care. They dismissed the films. And worse, they dismissed him. Casting agents stopped seeing Rickles as a serious actor. Even when he tried to pitch himself for better roles, people laughed, just not in the way he wanted. At a White House dinner years later, First Lady Barbara Bush mentioned his beach movies and chuckled. The label had stuck. Rickles felt trapped. He had worked so hard to build a career, and now he was the punchline of his own joke. Not because of his comedy, but because of the roles he had taken to pay the bills. Still, he didn't stop working. He returned to the clubs. He sharpened his act. He waited for a break. Then, one night in Las Vegas, that break arrived. It was the early 1960s. Rickles was performing at the Sands Hotel, the hottest spot in town. His crowd that night included someone very special, Frank Sinatra. Sinatra was more than a singer. He was a power player. If he liked you, doors opened. If he didn't, careers ended. Rickles knew this. He'd met Sinatra once before in a restaurant and asked him for a favor. "Frank, after my set, walk by my table and pretend we're friends. I want to impress this girl." Sinatra agreed. When the time came, Sinatra approached. Rickles looked up and said, "Frank, not now. Can't you see I'm with someone?" Silence. Then laughter. Sinatra loved it. He respected the guts. He respected the humor. From that night on, Rickles wasn't just another comic. He was Sinatra's comic. That single moment changed his status overnight. Suddenly, the guy from Bikini Beach could make fun of the most feared man in the room and get away with it. And when Frank Sinatra laughed, the whole world followed. With Frank Sinatra's approval, Don Rickles' career rocketed to a new level. It wasn't just that people found him funny. Now they respected him. Sinatra brought him into his world. Private parties, elite showrooms, and star-studded audiences. Rickles started performing regularly in Las Vegas, the capital of showbiz cool. The Rat Pack showed up. So did politicians, CEOs, and movie stars. And Rickles? He roasted them all. What made him different was that he didn't hold back, not even for the rich and powerful. He mocked Sinatra, Dean Martin, Ronald Reagan, even foreign dignitaries. The crowd expected it. They wanted it. Because somehow, even when he insulted people, it felt like love. He made people laugh at themselves. He broke down the walls that fame builds. But Rickles' act wasn't for the faint of heart. He moved fast. His jokes were sharp and risky. One wrong word could offend someone important. But he walked the line with precision. He knew how far to push. And when he crossed the line, he often did it on purpose. People called him Mr. Warmth, a nickname that was pure irony. On stage, he came across as mean. But off stage, the truth was different. Friends, family, and colleagues described him as gentle, kind, and deeply loyal. He never swore on stage. He didn't drink heavily. He rarely partied. He wasn't chasing attention. He was chasing laughter. Television helped take his act national. In the 60s and 70s, Rickles became a regular guest on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. The two had instant chemistry. Carson loved being roasted. He let Rickles say things no one else could get away with, and the audience ate it up. Then came the Dean Martin Celebrity Roasts, a series of TV specials where comedians would gather to poke fun at a celebrity honoree. Rickles became the star of those roasts. He crushed everyone, from politicians like Ronald Reagan to stars like Lucille Ball and Bob Hope. No one was safe. But somehow, everyone left smiling. These roasts made Rickles a household name. He wasn't just a nightclub act anymore. He was a comedy icon. People tuned in just to see what he would say next. And even as other comics softened their routines, Rickles stayed sharp. But while Rickles built a reputation for being fearless on stage, off stage, he kept his private life almost completely hidden. The spotlight never touched his personal grief, his family, or the deeper pain he carried. He once said, "I make fun of everybody. If I stopped and worried about who I was going to offend, I couldn't get up in the morning." That was true, but it was also a shield. Because as much as he gave to the audience, every night, every joke, there were parts of Don Rickles no one ever saw. Not until much later, and not until he lost what mattered most. Don Rickles may have roasted presidents, mobsters, and movie stars, but there was one person he never joked about cruelly: his wife, Barbara. In 1964, Rickles met Barbara Sklar. She wasn't impressed by fame, didn't care about Hollywood, and didn't laugh just because he was funny. She was calm, serious, and didn't let him get away with his usual charm. That's exactly what caught his attention. For the first time, someone saw past the act. They married in March 1965, and from that moment on, Barbara became Rickles' anchor. She traveled with him, kept him grounded, and reminded him there was more to life than applause. On stage, Rickles would tease her, calling her his warden or his boss. But behind closed doors, she was his center. Together, they built a quiet life off stage. They raised 2 children, Mindy and Larry. Don adored them, though he kept them away from the spotlight. He rarely brought work home. He wanted his kids to have a normal life, free from the chaos of show business. In 2007, Rickles got to see a different kind of success, one that meant more to him than any standing ovation. His son Larry, now a TV producer, made a documentary called Mr. Warmth, The Don Rickles Project. It was a tribute not just to the performer, but to the man. Interviews, old footage, personal moments, it showed the full picture. The film won an Emmy. But for Don, the real prize was knowing his son saw him not just as a comic, but as a father worth honoring. Then came the moment that shattered it all. On December 3rd, 2011, Larry died suddenly from pneumonia. He was just 41. Rickles was in his 80s. He had lived through war, through the ups and downs of showbiz, through threats and danger. But nothing prepared him for the pain of losing his child. He never talked about it publicly. Not once. Friends said it broke something in him that never truly healed. He kept working. He kept smiling for the cameras. But behind the scenes, he was quieter, slower. He carried that loss with him every day. Then, almost a decade later, another heartbreak arrived. On March 14th, 2021, exactly 56 years after their wedding day, Barbara passed away after a long illness. She had been his partner for over half a century. Through every show, every tour, every high and low. And now she was gone. Some said the timing was just coincidence. Others believed it was fate, that even in death, they had stayed connected. Rickles didn't live to see that day. He had passed in 2017. But those who knew them best weren't surprised by the date. Don and Barbara did everything together. Even goodbye. For all his jokes and insults, Rickles built his life around love, loyalty, and family. And when he lost them, a part of him was lost too. The world knew the comedian, but only a few truly knew the man. By the 1990s, most of Don Rickles' peers had either retired, faded into obscurity, or passed on. The comedy scene had changed. Edgier voices were rising. Stand-up had a new generation. But Rickles wasn't finished. At an age when most performers were winding down, he was about to surprise everyone. In 1995, director Martin Scorsese, known for intense, gritty films, cast Rickles in Casino, a violent drama about crime and betrayal in Las Vegas. The film starred heavyweights like Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and Sharon Stone. And in the middle of this powerhouse cast stood Don Rickles, a comic once known for calling people hockey puck. He played Billy Sherbert, the casino manager, loyal, tough, and surprisingly calm. No jokes, no fast talking, just quiet presence. Scorsese told Rickles that De Niro stayed deep in character between takes and that the set was very serious. Rickles nodded, then broke the rules. During a tense moment, as De Niro stood silently smoking a cigarette, Rickles shouted, "Will you say the goddamn lines? It's almost 6. I gotta go home." The entire crew burst out laughing. Even De Niro cracked a smile. Another time, Rickles said, "This guy's making $8 billion. I'm getting $2 and a coffee. Get somebody that can talk for Christ's sake." He kept things light, even in a heavy film. And yet, when the cameras rolled, he delivered. Critics praised his performance. No one expected Don Rickles, the roast master, to hold his own in a Scorsese crime epic. But he did. Just months later, another opportunity came. One that couldn't have been more different. Pixar was about to release its first full-length animated film, Toy Story. It was a risky project. No one had ever made a feature film using only computer animation. They needed strong voices. For Mr. Potato Head, they wanted Rickles. At first, he didn't get it. The director, John Lasseter, brought him a Mr. Potato Head toy. Rickles opened the box, saw the pieces fall out, looked in the mirror, and said, "Yeah, I see it." Recording animation was new for him. No audience, no stage, just a script and a microphone. But once he started improvising, the old Rickles magic kicked in. The voice was sarcastic, grumpy, funny, and somehow lovable. Toy Story was a massive hit. Rickles returned for the sequels. He voiced holiday specials, theme park rides, and video games. Over 750 lines were recorded for just one attraction. It was a new chapter, a new audience. Millions of kids knew him, not as the Vegas comic, not as Sinatra's friend, not even as a movie star, but as the voice of a talking potato. And Rickles loved it. Even more, his grandkids loved it. For them, Toy Story wasn't just a movie. It was pop. And that meant everything. In his 70s, Rickles became something no one saw coming, a children's icon. All because he never stopped saying yes to the next chapter. By the time he reached 90, Don Rickles had lived a life fuller than most could imagine. War veteran, Vegas legend, movie star, TV regular, and the voice of a toy beloved by generations. But even with all that behind him, he had no intention of slowing down. In early 2017, he was still working. He and Regis Philbin were planning a comedy tour together. Dates were booked, venues were ready, and Rickles, now nearly 91, was preparing for another round of travel, stage lights, and laughter. "I feel good," he said in an interview that February. "I've got no plans to stop." Behind the scenes, he was also developing a new TV project for AARP. It was aimed at older audiences, focusing on aging and humor. Even in his final months, he was still trying to connect with people, still finding ways to make life a little funnier, even when it wasn't easy. But on April 6, 2017, Don Rickles passed away at home in Century City, California. He died from kidney failure, just a few weeks shy of his 91st birthday. His wife Barbara was by his side. His family was with him. It was quiet, peaceful. The spotlight had faded, but the legacy remained. What came next was unexpected and fitting. When Pixar began working on Toy Story 4, Rickles hadn't recorded any new lines before his death. Recasting Mr. Potato Head was an option, but the filmmakers didn't want to replace him. They couldn't. Instead, Pixar's sound team went through decades of recordings, outtakes from previous films, theme park scripts, video game dialogue, old promotional clips. They pieced together Rickles' voice, line by line, creating a performance built entirely from his past work. And so, Don Rickles lived on, one last time, as Mr. Potato Head. At the end of Toy Story 4, Pixar added a simple message to the credits. In loving memory of Don Rickles. It wasn't loud or flashy. It didn't need to be. It was a quiet tribute to a man who had given his voice, his humor, and his heart to the world. After his death, tributes poured in. Comedians called him the greatest of all time. Jerry Seinfeld called him comedy's Mount Rushmore. Jimmy Kimmel cried while talking about him on air. Bob Newhart, Rickles' closest friend for over 50 years, said, "Don was the kindest man I ever knew." People remembered the jokes, but what they really talked about was the man behind them, the one who gave generously, who mentored young comics, who stayed humble even at the top. He never bragged. He never chased awards. He just kept showing up, night after night, until the very end. Don Rickles didn't just outlast most of his peers. He redefined what aging in comedy could look like. And somehow his voice, gruff, funny, unforgettable, kept echoing long after he was gone. After Don Rickles passed away, the world remembered the jokes, but his family remembered the silences, the quiet moments off stage, the weight he carried that he never spoke about. And for a long time, they kept those stories private. But in 2024, his daughter Mindy decided to finally tell the full truth. Not just about the man on stage, but the one at home, the father, the husband, the survivor. She shared stories he never told publicly. How mob threats once came dangerously close. How the loss of his son Larry quietly broke him. How guilt followed him through the decades. Including the night he skipped dinner with mob boss Joey Gallo. A decision that may have saved his life. She opened up about the fear he masked with humor. How growing up in a house shaped by war and immigration gave him an edge, but also left scars. Rickles never made jokes about those parts. They were off limits, sacred, and heavy. To the world, Don Rickles was bold, quick, and sharp. But at home, he was Pop, a soft-spoken grandfather who doted on his grandkids, Ethan and Harrison. He made them laugh, sure, but he also listened. He told them stories. He was gentle, kind, quiet in ways most people never imagined. Mindy began posting old clips, unseen interviews, and home videos. Not for fame, not for money, but to make sure people saw her dad the way she did. A museum exhibit followed, featuring Rickles' notebooks, photos, and personal letters. Fans lined up not just to remember the roasts, but to see the heart behind them, the vulnerability, the depth, the full picture. And what emerged was a legacy far bigger than comedy. Rickles gave millions of people laughter, but he also gave something else, permission. Permission to laugh at the things we fear, to let go of ego, to be honest, even if it stings. He never punched down. He never made jokes out of cruelty. He made fun of everyone equally because, in his words, we're all the same under the skin. He helped people survive moments of tension by giving them permission to laugh through it. That was his real gift. Not just timing or insults, but empathy, disguised as humor. Even now, years after his passing, his influence can be felt. Comedians still study him. Actors still quote him. Pixar still uses his voice at theme parks around the world. And kids still laugh at Mr. Potato Head, unaware that the man behind the voice once roasted Sinatra and narrowly dodged death at a mobster's birthday dinner. Don Rickles left behind more than jokes. He left behind a blueprint for how to live with pain, how to turn it into joy, and how to make sure the people you love know they matter. Because in the end, His greatest punchline wasn't what he said. It was what he endured and still chose to laugh.